Nicholas Hulkenberg, born the 19th of August 1987, is a German professional racing driver currently racing for the Renault F1 team. In 2015, he also contested 2 rounds of the 2015 FIA World Endurance Championship season for Porsche, winning the 2015 24 Hours of Le Mans in his first attempt. He was the 2009 champion of the GP2 Series, and is a previous champion of both the Formula 3 Euro Series and A1 Grand Prix, as part of A1 Team Germany. He is one of 5 drivers since 2005 to win the Formula 2, formerly GP2 Series, championship in his debut season, the others being Lewis Hamilton, Nico Rosberg, Charles Leclerc, and George Russell. As of February 2019, Hulkenberg holds the record for the most Formula 1 career starts without a podium finish, a record he broke when he failed to finish in his 129th race, the 2017 Singapore Grand Prix, and in so doing passed Adrian Sutil's previous record of 128. Hulkenberg raced in Formula 1 in 2010 with the Williams team. Despite winning the first pole position for Williams in more than 5 years, he was not retained for 2011 and joined Force India as a test and reserve driver. He was promoted to a race seat with the team for the 2012 season, joining Paul di Resta. In 2013 he drove for the Sauber Team 5, with Mexican driver Esteban Gutierrez as his teammate. Hulkenberg returned to Force India for the 2014 season. In October 2016, it was confirmed that he would switch to Renault for 2017. Hulkenberg made his GP2 Asia Series debut for the Art Grand Prix team at the 3rd round of the 2008-09 GP2 Asia Series in Bahrain, where he took pole position at his first attempt. He finished both races in 4th place, and this left him in 7th place in the championship. His second race weekend in Qatar saw him become the first night race pole sitter, and promptly turned that into becoming the first race winner under lights after a dominant performance. Such was his performance that he ended up over 13 seconds clear of second-placed driver Sergio Perez. He finished 3rd in the sprint race, taking his championship points tally to 27 from just 4 races. Despite this, he finished 6th in the championship. Hulkenberg continued with Art into the 2009 GP2 Series, partnering Pastor Maldonado, and took his first win in dominant fashion, during his home round of the series at the Nürburgring. With the series top 8 inverted grid, Hulkenberg started 8th for the sprint race. He won the sprint race as well, becoming the first driver to do the weekend double since Giorgio Pantano at Monza in the 2006 season. In doing so, he became only the second driver to complete the clean sweep, with pole position, 2 fastest laps and 2 wins, equaling the achievements of Nelson Piquet Jr., who achieved it at the Hungaroring, also in 2006. Hulkenberg clinched the title with 2 races to spare, after a 3rd-place finish in the Monza sprint race, shadowing Brazilians Luis Razia and Lucas Grassi home. The result left him with an unassailable 22-point lead heading to the final round, and in the process becoming the first driver to clinch the championship without the need for a final round decider. A 5th win followed at the Autodromo Internacional do Algarve, allowing Hulkenberg to break the 100-point barrier, and eventually won the title by 25 points from Vitaly Petrov. Worthy of note is that Hulkenberg ended the season 64 points clear of his teammate Pastor Maldonado, who would later go on to get his Williams race seat for the 2011 Formula 1 season. Hulkenberg first drove a Formula 1 car in a test for Williams in 2007. His manager, Willy Webber, had organized the test after failing to conclude a deal with Renault boss Flavio Briatore. The 2-day test was held at the Circuito de Jerez in Spain, and Hulkenberg outpaced Williams' driver Kazuki Nakajima, and set lap times 0.4 seconds slower than Nico Rosberg. Hulkenberg's performance at the test led to the Williams team signing him as a test driver, and he competed in several test sessions in addition to racing in lower formulae. His test contract with Williams was extended for 2009, despite in-season tests being banned from that season. Hulkenberg would also act as the team's reserve driver, in the event of the regular drivers being unable to compete. On the 2nd of November 2009, Hulkenberg was confirmed to race for Williams in 2010. Hulkenberg's teammate for his first season would be the experienced driver Rubens Barrichello, who moved from Brawn GP, which in turn was bought out by Mercedes-Benz. Hulkenberg made his debut at the Bahrain Grand Prix, recovering from an early spin to finish in 14th position. At the second round in Australia, he was involved in a first-lap incident with Kamui Kobayashi, after the Japanese driver's front wing failed and sent him into the barrier, rebounding into the path of Hulkenberg. At the third round in Malaysia, Hulkenberg made it to Q3 for the first time, qualifying in 5th place, out-qualifying teammate Barrichello for the first time. Hulkenberg looked set to finish 11th in the race until Fernando Alonso blew his engine 3 laps from the end, thus promoting Hulkenberg to 10th place. And with the new for 2010 points system, Hulkenberg along with Jaime Alguersuari scored their first points in Formula 1. He was 10th again at Silverstone, and at the Hungarian Grand Prix he finished 6th, a career best. He also picked up points finishes in Italy, Singapore, and Korea. At the Japanese Grand Prix, Renault driver Vitaly Petrov misjudged the move at the start and cut across Hulkenberg's nose, thus taking them both out of the race. Towards the end of the season there were reports that he could lose his seat at Williams to the GP2 Series champion Pastor Maldonado due to the money Maldonado could bring to the team. 20. Force India's Adrian Sutil was also linked to replace Hulkenberg at Williams. On the 6th of November Hulkenberg gained his first Formula 1 pole position, by 1.049 seconds over Sebastian Vettel at the Brazilian Grand Prix in a rain-affected qualifying session. This was the Williams team's first pole position since the 2005 European Grand Prix. Hulkenberg completed a final lap after pole position was already secured, increasing his gap to the rest of the field. After losing the lead on the opening lap, he eventually finished the race in 8th place, having been passed by drivers in more competitive cars. After the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, team boss Frank Williams confirmed that Hulkenberg would not be driving for the team in 2011. On the 26th of January 2011, Hulkenberg was confirmed as Force India's reserve driver for the 2011 season, where he would drive for the team in the Friday practice sessions. He replaced Paul di Resta, who was promoted to a race position in the team. Hulkenberg competed in the first practice sessions of all the races apart from Monaco, Hungary, Korea, India, and Abu Dhabi. On the 16th of December 2011, Force India announced Di Resta and Hulkenberg would be their drivers for the 2012 season. Hulkenberg qualified 9th for the Australian Grand Prix, 6 places ahead of Di Resta, but his race ended on the first lap after picking up damage in a first corner incident before retiring further round the course. He picked up his first points for Force India the following weekend, at the Malaysian Grand Prix. He finished in 9th place, having started the race in 16th. He again qualified 16th, for the Chinese Grand Prix. He achieved his best Formula 1 finish with a 4th place at the Belgian Grand Prix. He had been running second in the race, when he was jumped by Kimi Räikkönen during the pit stops, before the faster Red Bull of Sebastian Vettel passed them both. Hulkenberg did not score any points in Italy or Singapore, but collected points at all of the next 5 Grands Prix, except on the Yas Marina circuit where he was involved in a collision on the first lap, and subsequently retired. This was the first time he scored points in more than 2 races in a row. In the last race of the season, the 2012 Brazilian Grand Prix, Hulkenberg qualified 7th but was promoted to 6th after Pastor Maldonado received a 10-place grid penalty. By lap 3 he had moved forward 2 places, and on lap 5 he passed Fernando Alonso for 3rd place. He moved into 2nd position when McLaren's Lewis Hamilton pitted on lap 11. Hulkenberg then passed Jenson Button at the start of lap 19 to take the lead. He and Button built up a 45-second lead before the safety car was deployed because of debris on the track. He still led until he was passed by Hamilton, after sliding at the entry of turn 8 on lap 49. On lap 55 he collided with Hamilton when the rear of Hulkenberg's car slid out while trying to pass him at turn 1. This ended Hamilton's last race for McLaren. After being given a drive-through penalty as a result of the incident, Hulkenberg finished 5th, letting a maiden race win and podium finish slip through his fingers. Nevertheless, this allowed him to take 11th place in the Drivers' Championship from Kamui Kobayashi. Hulkenberg finished the year 17 points ahead of his teammate Paul di Resta, and he out-qualified him 12 times, to di Resta's 8. On the 31st of October 2012, Sauber confirmed they had signed Hulkenberg for the 2013 season to replace Kamui Kobayashi. Hulkenberg failed to start the Australian Grand Prix due to a leak in the fuel system of his Sauber C32. He had qualified 11th for the race, but was withdrawn for safety reasons. At the Malaysian Grand Prix, Hulkenberg qualified in 12th, but finished the race in 8th place. 27. Hulkenberg put in his best qualifying performance of the season to date at the Italian Grand Prix to put himself 3rd on the grid. After losing 2 places to the Ferraris of Felipe Massa and Fernando Alonso, he managed to keep 5th place even though harried by the Mercedes of Nico Rosberg towards the end of the race. By finishing in 5th place, he overtook Toro Rosso driver Jean-Eric Vergne in the Drivers' Championship. His best finish was at the Korean Grand Prix, where he finished 4th after close battle with Hamilton and Alonso, in which he showed impressive defending skills and made no mistakes, in a battle where he overtook Hamilton more than once. On the 3rd of December 2013, Force India confirmed they had signed Hulkenberg for 2014 to race alongside Sergio Perez. In the first round, Hulkenberg finished the Australian Grand Prix in 7th place, his first finish in Melbourne, but was promoted to 6th after the disqualification of 2nd-placed Daniel Ricciardo. He later finished 5th at the Malaysian Grand Prix, spending a large amount of time in 4th place, holding off Ferrari's Fernando Alonso before being overtaken. Another 5th place at Bahrain put Hulkenberg in 3rd place of the drivers' standings, behind the 2 Mercedes drivers, Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg. At the Chinese Grand Prix, Hulkenberg took 6th place, taking 8 points. He fell to 4th place in the Drivers' Championship after Fernando Alonso finished in 3rd place. Force India lost 2nd in the Constructors' Championship to Red Bull Racing. Consistent point-scoring runs throughout the season meant that Hulkenberg finished the season in 9th place in the Drivers' Championship with 96 points, a career best, compared to his teammates' 59 points, and helped Force India achieve 6th place in the Constructors' Championship, following the improvements of Williams and McLaren throughout the season. His best result of the season was 5th place, which he achieved 4 times. In October 2014, Force India confirmed they had resigned Hulkenberg for 2015. In the opening round in Australia, he finished 7th, a lap down. However, he would not score again, in an uncompetitive Force India, until Canada. In Hungary, mid-race, he suffered a big crash at turn 1 when his front wing detached and he drove over it, sending him slightly airborne and into the barriers, costing him a potential 4th place. He then failed to finish 5 of the next 7 races. In Belgium, he had a power unit failure on the way to the grid. While in Singapore, he was tagged by Felipe Massa at turn 3 and spun into the barriers, and received a 3-place grid penalty after being deemed responsible. In Russia he spun at turn 2 at the start and collected Marcus Ericsson, potentially costing him a podium finish, and in the United States he slid into Daniel Ricciardo and broke his front right suspension. He finished the season 10th with 58 points, 20 points behind his teammate, and helped Force India to secure 5th place in the Constructors' Championship, and his best result of the season was 6th, which he achieved 3 times. Hulkenberg again raced for Force India in 2016 alongside Sergio Perez. In the opening round in Australia, he finished 7th. He would finish the next 2 races in 15th position, with the Force India being uncompetitive. In Russia, he was hit by his former teammate Esteban Gutierrez and retired from the race. He would also retire from the next race with an oil leak. A podium, once again, escaped Hulkenberg's grasp in Monaco. He qualified 5th and was set to finish on the podium, when he got stuck in traffic following his pit stop and his teammate jumped him for the final podium place. He eventually finished 6th, passing the eventual world champion Nico Rosberg, who had struggled throughout the race, just before the finish line on the last lap. This was followed by points finishes at the next 2 races. He spun in qualifying during the 2016 European Grand Prix held at Baku, when the Force India was very competitive. This caused him to qualify 13th and finish 9th, while Perez qualified 2nd, demoted to 7th after a grid penalty, and finished 3rd. At the following race in Austria, he put in another strong qualifying performance to qualify 3rd, which became 2nd when Nico Rosberg served his 5-place grid penalty. However, he had a poor start, and was overtaken by quicker cars as the race went on, until his brakes failed and he had to retire. This was followed by 5 consecutive points finishes, including 4th at the 2016 Belgian Grand Prix, his best result of the season, when he was initially running 2nd after the first lap but was eventually passed by the faster cars of Daniel Ricciardo and Lewis Hamilton. At the following race in Singapore, he was involved in a first-lap collision, where he was squeezed between 2 drivers, and had to retire from the race. Hulkenberg finished 8th at the next 2 races. Having announced his decision to move to Renault for the 2017 season before the 2016 United States Grand Prix, Hulkenberg put on some rejuvenated performances. He qualified 7th in the USA, before retiring after being squeezed in between Valtteri Bottas and Sebastian Vettel. He then qualified 5th in Mexico, ahead of the Ferraris, and finished 7th. He outqualified his teammate again in Brazil and was running 4th, but he picked up a puncture from debris on the track, following Kimi Räikkönen's crash, costing him a podium finish, and fell outside the points before recovering to 7th, fending off Daniel Ricciardo towards the end of the race. He capped off his season in Abu Dhabi by out-qualifying Perez again to 7th place and finishing in the same position, having survived a collision with Max Verstappen on the first lap. Hulkenberg scored 72 points in the season, finishing 9th in the Drivers' Championship and helping Force India finish the Constructors' Championship in 4th. On the 14th of October 2016, Renault Sport announced that Hulkenberg had signed a multi-year agreement to race with the Renault Sport Formula One team. He got his first points for the team at the 3rd race of the season in Bahrain with 9th place, followed by 8th in Russia. Hulkenberg then finished in 6th place in Spain, Renault's best result in the sport since returning in 2016. His point-scoring streak ended in Monaco when he retired, when running in the points, with gearbox issues. He finished 8th in Canada, which was followed by a retirement in Azerbaijan, when he clumsily clipped the wall while running in a promising 6th place. In Austria, he finished 13th, finishing behind his teammate Jolyon Palmer for the first time, following a bad start. A new Renault upgrade brought massive improvement at the 2017 British Grand Prix as Hulkenberg qualified and finished sixth. The car also proved to be the best of the rest, behind Mercedes, Ferrari and Red Bull, in Hungary as he qualified seventh, but a five-place grid penalty for a new gearbox meant that he started 12th on the grid. He was set to score points in the race, before a slow pit stop dropped him down the field and he eventually retired from the race. There was an incident during the race, when Kevin Magnussen had pushed Hulkenberg of the track as they were battling for position. Magnussen received a time penalty for the incident. Hulkenberg confronted Magnussen while he was interviewed by Danish TV in the media pen, labeling him nasty and the most unsporting driver of the whole grid, and Magnussen foul-mouthedly responded with "suck my balls." Hulkenberg entered the summer break with 26 points and in 10th place in the championship. Hulkenberg returned from the summer break in Belgium in good form as he qualified 7th and finished 6th in the race. At Singapore, it was announced that Carlos Sainz Jr. would replace Jolyon Palmer, who at the time had scored 0 points to Hulkenberg's 34 points, for the 2018 season. Hulkenberg qualified best of the rest in 7th. After the first lap of the race, Hulkenberg found himself in 3rd place, following the first corner collision and subsequent retirements of Sebastian Vettel, Kimi Räikkönen, Max Verstappen and the fast-starting McLaren of Fernando Alonso. He looked set to take his long-awaited first podium finish in Formula One, until Daniel Kvyat crashed and brought out the safety car, and a blunder in strategy by Renault left him in 5th place. He eventually got up to 4th place, before an oil leak brought about his retirement from the race, in which he succeeded Adrian Sutil to become the record holder for the most starts in Formula One without a podium finish. At the Japanese Grand Prix, it was announced that Carlos Sainz Jr. would replace Palmer for the rest of the season beginning at the next Grand Prix in Austin. 35. In the race, he was running comfortably in the points for the majority of the race, when a failure in the DRS mechanism of his car meant he had to retire from the race. In their time together as teammates, Hulkenberg scored 34 points to Palmer's 8 points and out-qualified Palmer in all 16 races. In the USA, Hulkenberg retired on lap 4 with an engine issue. In Mexico, he once again retired, again from a net 4th place, with an engine issue. This was the 3rd time in a row that he had failed to finish a race and the 4th time in 5 races. At the Brazilian Grand Prix, he led home teammate Sainz to 10th place, his first points in almost 3 months, with his previous points finish being his 6th place finish at Belgium in August. He qualified best of the rest in Abu Dhabi with 7th place. He finished the race in 6th place, having received a contentious 5-second penalty for passing Sergio Perez of the track at the start of the race, when many believed he should have given the position back. He ended up believing enough of a gap to Perez that the time penalty did not affect his position. With 6th place, Renault overtook Toro Rosso in the Constructors' Championship for 6th place. This confirmed Renault's position as 6th in the Constructors' Championship and moved Hulkenberg up to 43 points for the season, the same as Massa, but courtesy of more 6th-place finishes, he ended the season 10th in the standings. He had out-qualified his teammates over the course of the season 19-1 and outscored his teammates 43-14 over the course of the season. For the 2018 season, Hulkenberg remained at Renault, alongside Carlos Sainz, who was competing in his first full season for the Renault F1 team. Hulkenberg and Renault started the season well with a 7th and 2 6th places in the first 3 races. The first race in Australia with Sainz finishing in 10th, marked the first double points finish for Renault in F1 since the 2011 Turkish Grand Prix. 39-40, at the 4th race of the season in Baku, Hulkenberg was handed a 5-place grid penalty for changing his damaged gearbox. He qualified 9th and would start 14th. This meant the end of his streak of starting the last 6 races 7th on the grid. He had made his way up to 5th place by lap 10, when he lost the rear of his car on lap 10, and clattered the wall with his left rear tire and retired with suspension damage, ending his 5-race point-scoring streak. It was second time in 2 years that he had retired from a top 6 position in Baku from an unforced error. Hulkenberg's misfortune continued at the next race in Spain. He went out in Q1 for the first time in 59 races due to a fuel pressure problem with his car. Then he was taken out by the spinning Romain Grosjean on the first lap of the race. Hulkenberg criticized Grosjean's driving following the crash, for which the Frenchman received a grid penalty for the next race. In Monaco, Hulkenberg was outqualified by a teammate by merit for the first time since the 2016 Japanese Grand Prix. Nevertheless, he finished the race in 8th, having started in 11th, with his teammate Sainz obeying team orders late in the race to let him past. He followed this up with another point-scoring finish in Canada after qualifying and finishing the race in 7th. The next 3 races made up Formula One's first ever triple-header in France, Austria, and Britain. Hulkenberg finished 9th in France, followed by a retirement from 9th in Austria with an engine failure. It was his 3rd retirement in 6 races and his 7th retirement in his last 16 races. However, he finished the triple-header on a high, finishing 6th at the British Grand Prix. Hulkenberg achieved his best ever result for Renault at his home Grand Prix in Germany with 5th place, overtaking Kevin Magnussen late on when the rain started to fall. After a refueling problem limited him to only 13th on the grid, he finished 12th at the Hungarian Grand Prix. Nevertheless, he entered the summer break with 52 points and 7th in the championship as the effective leader of the midfield, which many drivers had started to dub the B Championship of Formula One or Formula 1.5, due to very large gap in performance to the top 3 teams of Mercedes, Ferrari, and Red Bull. In Belgium, Hulkenberg triggered a massive first corner collision after starting 18th due to engine penalties. Hulkenberg outbraked himself and hit Fernando Alonso, who was launched above the Saab of Charles Leclerc, with one of Alonso's tires hitting the new controversially introduced safety device, the halo. The collision also ultimately ended the races of both Kimi Räikkönen and Daniel Ricciardo. Hulkenberg was deemed to have completely misjudged the situation by the race stewards and handed a 10-place grid penalty for the next race. The spectacular crash was likened to the crash at the 2012 Belgian Grand Prix initiated by Romain Grosjean. Following the incident, Hulkenberg, who had been a vocal opposer to the halo, introduced in 2018, admitted that it was pretty useful. Hulkenberg suffered a tough period of results, coinciding with Renault's loss of competitiveness, by only scoring 1 point in the next 4 races. He bounced back with a 6th-place finish at the United States Grand Prix. With Sainz finishing in 7th, this was the best team result for Renault in a race since they rejoined the sport in 2016, beating the 7th and 8th place the 2 drivers had achieved in Canada earlier in the year. This was followed by another strong race in Mexico with another 6th place. His season ended with 2 successive retirements due to high engine temperatures in Brazil and after being rolled over into the barriers by Romain Grosjean in Abu Dhabi. Nevertheless, he finished the season as the champion of the rest in 7th place with 69 points, 7 points ahead of Sergio Perez, as Renault also secured 4th place in the Constructors' Championship. For the 2019 season, Nico Hulkenberg was joined at Renault by multiple Grand Prix winner Daniel Ricciardo, who was signed from Red Bull. Hulkenberg, yet to score a podium in 158 races by the beginning of the 2019 season, said his future in the sport depends on the outcome of the duel, as his ability could be measured against a Grand Prix winner, for the first time since his rookie season in 2010, when he was teammate to Rubens Barrichello at Williams. Meanwhile, Renault managing director, Cyril Abiteboul, believed that the driver pairing was one of the strongest, if not the strongest, driver lineup on the grid.